Welcome to the Chemistry Lab walkthrough for Lab 2A, using differences in physical properties to separate a mixture. In this lab we will separate a mixture of salt and sand and find the percentage of salt and sand and the percent recovered. When you arrive at the lab, proceed to your lab station. You will find in the drawer that's numbered for your lab station, the top drawer has equipment in it, and there will be an inventory sheet that will list the equipment that you should find in that drawer. The second drawer has lab coats, which should be returned neatly to that lab station, and the cupboard next to it has the same number, has some additional pieces of equipment, which will include a Bunsen burner, ring stand, iron ring, wire gauze, and a wash bottle. As you begin the lab, the first thing we need to do is zero the balance, as you learned in class, to make sure that you have an accurate record of your mass. We will need to find the mass of an empty, dry beaker that will be the we'll use to gather our mixture of salt and sand. And once we've found the mass of the beaker, we'll proceed to find the mass of the watch glass with an evaporating dish, and we will keep them together. We'll find the mass of them together, and then the mass of a single piece of filter paper. And after we have completed that initial preparation, we'll obtain a small sample of the mixture of salt and sand. We'll then determine the mass of the beaker containing the salt and the sand, and this will allow us to determine the actual mass of the mixture itself. And once we've actually determined the mass, we need to set up our filter paper. We'll place the filter paper in a filter funnel. Whenever we place a filter funnel on the tabletop, store it with the stem pointing up so that it doesn't roll. Don't lay it down or it'll roll off. Fold the filter paper in half once, and then fold that in half again, which will give us a quarter circle of filter paper. We'll open that filter funnel up then so that we have one thickness of paper on one side and 3 thicknesses of paper on the other side. This creates a funnel which will hold the sand and keep the sand from washing down into the evaporating dish. If we fold it instead so that there are 2 thicknesses on either side, it creates an opening in the bottom and the sand will wash out. We want to avoid that. Make sure we fold the paper properly. The paper is placed into the filter funnel. It may be dampened with a few drops of water from a wash bottle, and that will allow the paper to stick, cause the paper to stick, which will create a nice filter funnel for us to put the salt and sand mixture into. Then as we place it on the ring stand, we'll use the iron ring and a clay triangle to support the filter funnel. Set the iron ring low enough so the stem of the funnel barely touches the evaporating dish, and then we'll transfer the salt sand mixture into the filter funnel. We can wash that out with a little bit of water from the wash bottle, which allows us to get all of the mixture out of the beaker. This is important because we did determine the mass of the entire mixture. At this point, we're ready to begin using the differences in solubility to wash down the salt out of the mixture. We'll do this with 4 portions of 5 milliliters each of hot water. And so you can obtain hot water, and we'll pour the first one in over the top of the salt sand mixture. Allow it to drain down all the way so that it stopped draining, and then we'll repeat that with a second portion and pour the second portion of hot water, 5 milliliters, over the top of the salt sand mixture as we did with the first. And then we'll follow that with yet a third portion of 5 milliliters of hot water poured over the top of the salt sand mixture. Continue to wash the salt down into the bottom, and Then the fourth one we'll pour around the top of the filter paper so that we wash the salt completely out of the filter paper. At this point, once the filtrate has completely drained into the evaporating dish, we are ready to begin the recovery process. We'll remove the filter funnel and remove the filter paper from the funnel, which now contains the wet sand. Place this on the base of the ring stand near where we'll place the Bunsen burner, so the heat from the Bunsen burner will help evaporate the water and dry the paper and the sand. And again, remember to place the filter funnel upside down when you store it on the countertop so it doesn't roll off and break. We'll place the evaporating dish on a wire gauze on top of the ring stand, and we can proceed to light our Bunsen burner. Remember, strike the match before turning on the gas to the Bunsen burner. And once we have the Bunsen burner lit, we will continue to heat the evaporating dish and begin to evaporate off the water. We should bring it to a gentle boil, so we don't need a terribly hot flame, but a gentle flame will work. And if it gets too warm, we may need to move the burner out from underneath the evaporating dish so that we can have a gentle boil taking place. We don't want it to splatter. We'll continue to heat this until approximately 2/3 of the volume has evaporated. And once we're down to about 1/3 of the initial volume of the water in the evaporating dish, we will then place the watch glass over the top of the evaporating dish so that any splatters of salt solution that are coming from boiling it will be stick to the watch glass, and we won't lose them and won't lose that mass of the salt. Continue to heat until it is completely dry and there's no more steam and there's no more moisture remaining on the watch glass. At first the evaporating dish will become dry, but then we need to continue to heat it until all of the water has evaporated from the watch glass as well. And once we have completed that, it'll look something like this, completely dry. Now, at this point, once it's dry and we'll let it cool, you can mass the watch glass and evaporating dish, and from that mass find the mass of the salt that you've recovered. We'll also need to weigh or determine the mass of the paper with the sand, and that has to be completely dried, so we'll wait until that's completely dried. Once that's reached, it's completely dry, we will then be able to determine the mass of the salt. From the mass of the salt and the mass of the sand, you can determine the percent salt and percent sand, and from the initial mass and the sum of the masses of the recovered substances, you can determine your percent recovery. Remember to record the data on the data table in your lab logbook. Remember to show all of your work for your analysis, and as you write your conclusions, remember to record those also in your lab logbook. I hope that helps, and we'll see you in the lab.